The galaxy was vast, ancient, and indifferent. For eons, it had been ruled by the Galactic Council, an alliance of dominant alien species whose primary concern was maintaining their grip on power. Beneath their towering spires and shining fleets were countless subjugated worlds, their inhabitants reduced to tools for the Council's ambitions. Among them were the humans, a species once filled with promise, now scattered across the galaxy as little more than slaves. Captain Alara Voss was a survivor of that broken humanity. She had seen Earth fall under the Council's rule when she was only a child, watching as Zytherian warships darkened the skies and tore through Earth's defenses. In the decades since, she had adapted as humans always did. Now, she piloted cargo ships for the Zytherian Trade Guild, ferrying precious minerals mined by human labor across the stars. To her overseers, she was reliable, compliant, and thoroughly beaten. A perfect servant. She kept her rage buried deep, but it simmered under her calm exterior. As her ship, the Nova's Mercy, drifted into orbit around Altar 9, Alara felt a familiar knot of dread in her stomach. Altar 9 was one of the most brutal mining colonies in the galaxy. Humans toiled there from birth to death, extracting rare ores needed for the Council's advanced technologies. The Zytherians were merciless, their whip-like appendages ready to lash at the first sign of defiance. Alara docked at the orbital station and waited for her Zytherian handler, Overseer Mox, to board. Mox was a typical Zytherian, tall, insectoid, and oozing disdain for anything not of his kind. He scuttled into the cockpit, his compound eyes scanning her as if she were a particularly uninteresting piece of machinery. "You're late," Mox hissed, his voice like sandpaper on glass. "Traffic near the nebula," Alara replied evenly, keeping her tone neutral. It was a lie, but Mox wasn't likely to care. "Excuses. Unload the cargo. And stay in the ship this time. I won't have you mingling with the workers." Alara clenched her jaw but nodded. She knew better than to argue. From her viewport, she watched the colony below. The surface of Altar 9 was a scarred wasteland, its air thick with toxic fumes. Thousands of humans labored in the open-pit mines, their movements sluggish under the weight of exhaustion and despair. Even from orbit, she could see the overseers moving among them, their energy weapons ready to punish any lapse in productivity. But something felt different today. The workers were slower than usual, their lines less orderly. There was tension in their movements, like a storm brewing just below the surface. "Alara, do you copy?" came a voice over her ship's comm system. It was a familiar voice, Darius Kale, an old friend from the days when she had fought in the Resistance. Her heart skipped. They hadn't spoken in years. "Darius? What the hell are you doing on this frequency?" "No time for questions," he said, his tone urgent. "Something big is happening. The workers are about to rise up. You need to get out of here before it all goes to hell." Alara's pulse quickened. "You're telling me there's a rebellion? Here? Now?" "Yes. But listen to me, this isn't going to end well. The Zytherians are ready to respond, and they'll make an example out of everyone. You can't save them, Alara. Just get out." Before she could reply, a deafening explosion rocked the station. Alara's hands flew to the controls as alarms blared. Through the viewport, she saw one of the colony's main processing facilities erupt in flames. The workers had done it, they had struck the first blow. But her brief surge of hope was crushed by what she saw next. Zytherian gunships descended like vultures, raining plasma fire on the mines. The workers were defenseless, their crude mining tools no match for the Council's advanced weaponry. Mox returned to the cockpit, his mandibles clicking furiously. "What is the meaning of this?" he screeched. Alara didn't think. Years of suppressed anger and grief surged to the surface, and before she could stop herself, she grabbed the plasma cutter from her tool belt and drove it into Mox's thorax. The Zytherian let out a guttural shriek, his limbs flailing before he collapsed, twitching on the floor. She stared at his body, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had just killed a Zytherian overseer, a crime punishable by death. The alarms continued to wail, and Alara knew she had no time to lose. She sealed the cockpit, disengaged from the station, and fired up the engines. The Nova's Mercy lurched away from the station, weaving through the chaos of gunships and fleeing transports. As she plotted a course for the jungle moon of Veritas Prime, a human resistance enclave, her mind raced. She had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The Zytherians would hunt her, and the Council would brand her a terrorist. But for the first time in years, she felt a spark of something she thought she'd lost. Hope. The galaxy had pushed humanity to its breaking point. And now, Elara realized humanity was ready to push back. The jungle moon of Veritas Prime was both a sanctuary and a graveyard. Hidden in the shadow of an unremarkable star system, it was one of the last places in the galaxy where humans could gather freely, if they managed to escape their oppressors. Here, amid towering trees and bioluminescent flora, the human resistance struggled to survive and plan its rebellion. Elara Voss brought her ship down in a hidden clearing, the Nova's Mercy hissing as it cooled. She stepped out into the humid air, her eyes scanning for familiar faces. Almost immediately, a figure emerged from the dense foliage, Darius Kale. "You made it," he said, his voice gruff but relieved. "Barely," Elara replied. "And not without complications." She gestured toward her ship. "Killed my handler. The Council's going to come after me with everything they've got." Darius gave her a grim smile. "Welcome to the club." He led her through the jungle to the Resistance camp, a sprawling collection of makeshift shelters and concealed fortifications. Hundreds of humans moved through the area, tending to weapons, repairing equipment, or simply trying to rest. Their faces bore the scars of years of hardship, but in their eyes, Elara saw something else: determination. Inside the command tent, Darius introduced her to the Resistance's current leaders. Most were veterans of failed uprisings on other colonies, hardened by loss but unwilling to give up. Among them was Dr. Marcus Lane, a name Elara recognized immediately. "You're the scientist," she said, shaking his hand. "The one who disappeared after the Council took control of the Sol system." Marcus nodded. "I didn't disappear. They captured me, forced me to work on their weapons. But I managed to escape, and brought a little something with me." He placed a small data chip on the table. "This contains plans for a bioenhancement serum I've been developing in secret. It's designed to strengthen human physiology, make us faster, stronger, more resilient. If we can produce it in enough quantities, it could turn the tide in our favor." Darius leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "What's the catch?" "The process is risky," Marcus admitted. "It hasn't been tested extensively, and it requires rare materials to synthesize. But if we can pull it off, it might give us the edge we need." Elara's gaze shifted between them. "Even if it works, how do we fight an empire with ships and weapons that can obliterate us from orbit? We need more than just enhanced soldiers." Marcus smiled faintly. "Which is why we're going to strike where it hurts most. Their resources." That evening, Elara joined the Resistance leaders in planning their first major operation, intercepting a Zytherian supply convoy bound for a Council-controlled world. The convoy carried weapons, energy cells, and rations, enough to sustain the Resistance for months. The plan was bold and risky. The Resistance had little in the way of ships or firepower, relying instead on guerrilla tactics and Marcus's improvised tech. But Elara saw no hesitation in their eyes. They were ready to fight. As the meeting ended, Elara found herself alone with Darius. "You think this will work?" she asked quietly. Darius shrugged. "Doesn't matter. What matters is that we're fighting back." Elara nodded, her resolve hardening. The Council had spent centuries breaking humanity's spirit. But here, on this hidden moon, she felt the first stirrings of something greater, the spark of a revolution. The ambush on the Zytherian convoy was a resounding success. Using Elara's piloting skills and Marcus Lane's experimental tech, the Resistance overwhelmed the heavily guarded supply ships. They had struck fast, disabling the convoy's engines with electromagnetic bursts before boarding and neutralizing the Zytherian soldiers inside. It wasn't a victory without cost. Several Resistance fighters had died in the battle, but it was a victory nonetheless. For the first time in years, humans had struck back, and the galaxy was taking notice. Alara stood on the bridge of the Nova's Mercy, watching as the Resistance fleet returned to Veritas Prime. Below her, crates of stolen weapons and supplies were unloaded by volunteers. The camp, once quiet and resigned, now buzzed with energy. Hope was spreading. "It's already working," Darius said, joining her on the bridge. "Other enclaves are reaching out. Some want to join us. Others are asking for weapons, advice, anything they can use to fight back." Alara nodded, though her thoughts were darker. The Council won't ignore this for long. Once they realize we're more than a nuisance, they'll come for us. "They will," Darius agreed. "But for now, we've got momentum. We need to use it." The Resistance's next step was to cripple the Council's supply chains. The humans weren't the only species suffering under the Galactic Council's rule, and whispers of rebellion were spreading among the other oppressed peoples. On the desert world of Calthur, the Krelsh, a warrior species known for their brutal strength, had begun a small insurrection. The Council was responding with overwhelming force, deploying entire fleets to crush the uprising. Alara saw an opportunity. If the Council is focusing on the Krelsh, their outer territories will be vulnerable, she said during the strategy meeting. "We can hit them where they least expect it, on their agricultural colonies." The plan was daring, even reckless. The Resistance would raid several Council-controlled farming worlds, stealing food supplies and distributing them to allied enclaves. It was a move designed to weaken the Council's grip on its territories while solidifying the growing rebellion. The raids began a week later, with Alara leading the first strike. Her fleet, bolstered by Krelsh allies, struck fast and hard, taking the Council's forces by surprise. The Resistance stole enough food to feed their forces for months, and the victory further emboldened their allies. But the Council was no longer ignoring them. The response came swiftly. Zytherian fleets descended on Veritas Prime, bombing suspected Resistance strongholds from orbit. The jungle burned, and hundreds of fighters and civilians were killed. Alara barely escaped with her crew, her ship damaged and her heart heavy with guilt. As she watched Veritas Prime burn from the safety of a nearby asteroid belt, Alara vowed that the Council would pay for every life lost. "We've made them bleed," Darius said grimly. "Now they'll stop at nothing to destroy us." Alara's expression hardened. "Let them try. This fire has already spread, and it's not going out." The rebellion had begun, and there was no turning back. Arinder Prime, the shining capital of the Galactic Council, was a fortress of unmatched power. Its defense grid could vaporize entire fleets, and its orbital stations bristled with weapons capable of reducing planets to ash. No one had ever dared to attack it. Until now, the Resistance fleet emerged from hyperspace in a chaotic wave, a mismatched collection of stolen Council ships, human-made vessels, and crude warcraft from allied species. It was not a force that should have been capable of challenging the Council, but desperation and determination gave them strength. At the helm of the Nova's Mercy, Alara Voss stared at the colossal planet ahead, her jaw set. "This is it," she said into the comms. "Everything we've fought for leads here. Today we break their chains or we die trying." The Council fleet responded almost instantly. Zytherian dreadnoughts and Terran battlecruisers poured into the fray, their weapons lighting up the darkness of space. Alara's ship rocked as enemy fire grazed its shields, but she held steady, issuing orders to her crew. "Darius, take the flank. Marcus, disable that dreadnought." Darius's fighter squadron peeled away, diving through enemy lines with surgical precision. Meanwhile, Marcus Lane, now coordinating from an allied cruiser, used his experimental tech to unleash an EMP blast that sent a Zytherian ship spinning into the void. The Resistance was holding its own, but the real battle wasn't in space. Deep within Arinder Prime's orbital defense station, Kara, the young girl who had become a symbol of hope, was making her way toward the Council's ultimate weapon, the Stellar Lance. The Lance was a planet killer, capable of destroying entire systems, and the Council had prepared it to obliterate Earth's solar system as a final warning to the rebellion. Kara moved silently through the station's labyrinthine halls, her small frame hidden beneath stolen Zytherian armor. Her unique immunity to the station's bioscanners allowed her to slip past defenses that would have killed anyone else. Guided by Marcus's schematics and the whispers of her own intuition, she reached the weapons control room. Inside, she found herself face to face with High Overseer Krail, the architect of humanity's suffering. The insectoid Zytherian towered over her, his mandibles clicking in amusement. "A child," he sneered. "This is what humanity sends to stop us?" Pathetic. Kara didn't respond. Instead, she activated a plasma charge hidden in her armor, throwing it at the control console. The explosion rocked the room, disabling the weapon's targeting systems. Krail lunged at her, but Kara was faster. She dodged his strikes, using her small size to her advantage. In a final act of defiance, she triggered the station's self-destruct sequence, locking it behind a secure override code. As alarms blared, Kara looked up at Krail. "This is for Altar 9, she said, before slamming a plasma blade into his chest. The Resistance fleet watched from orbit as the station erupted in a massive explosion, the shockwave scattering the Council's forces. The Stellar Lance was gone, and with it, the Council's grip on absolute power. The battle for Irinder Prime turned decisively in the Resistance's favor. Ships that had once fought for the Council began retreating or surrendering, and the remaining forces were overwhelmed. When the smoke cleared, Alara stood on the Council's central dais, addressing billions of freed beings across the galaxy. "Today, we proved that no empire is invincible. No chains are unbreakable. The Council sought to crush us, but they only made us stronger. From this day forward, humanity is free, and we will fight to ensure no species is ever enslaved again." The galaxy would never forget the day humanity finally snapped.